Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dedicated Show. Today, we're going to talk to you about understanding your data within minutes, especially your new data. We're going to have some very special guests joining us today from Visplore. Harald Peringer and Thomas Muehlbacher are going to join us to take us through the journey of how Visplore came to be. We're going to talk about some of the steps of how we actually understand new data, and we have some really cool giveaways for you today. So as you're joining the session, all you have to do to participate in one of the giveaways is type in hashtag Visplore into the comments. What this will do is automatically put you into a raffle where you can win, and 2 winners will be selected. Free membership for the dedicated Inner Circle, which has access to plenty of courses like storytelling, data to dashboard courses, as well as private live sessions every month. Now, Visplore is also kind enough to give away 6-month free professional access to their software, and they're going to select the winner after the session. The way to win the 6-month Visplore access is actually to ask questions. So as you know, as part of the dedicated show, we try to take as many questions and comments from the live audience as possible. So definitely start asking your questions when we bring on our very special guests, and they're going to select the best question asked as a winner. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring up both of our guests. We have Harald and Thomas here. Hello, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the Dedicated Show. I'm really, really happy to have you both on here. I think it's always good to get started with introductions. So if you guys can just tell the audience a little bit about yourselves.
Yeah, maybe I get started. So, hi, I'm Harald from Visplore. I always used to be a big fan of interactive computer graphics, and well, that's how I got to do data visualization. I think data is becoming so important, but many statistics tools are quite a bit dry, and that's why I always wanted to make data analysis kind of an engaging experience that feels different. And so this is why after studying computer science, I did a PhD in interactive visual analytics, where I became the head at visual analytics research for more than 10 years at a research center here in Vienna, Austria. And there we did leading edge research, how to make visual analytics of big data an engaging experience.
Awesome. Harald from Visplore. And I absolutely love how you put your name in there. So guys, if you want to find Harald on LinkedIn, just look for Harald and Visplore, and I'm sure you'll find him. And Thomas, let's hear your intro, please.
Yeah, hi, how's it going? I'm Thomas, the CTO of Visplore. Now, my background is a bit similar to Harald's, actually. It's in computer science. And I started as a developer in Harald's group about 9 years ago. Yeah, and the story was also quite similar. I wanted to make computer games, but instead I ended up making data exploration fun. So that's almost as cool.
That's the same thing, really.
I did my PhD also in Harald's group on making interactive machine learning more accessible, and I got some great feedback on the users, on actual users, for all of these visual approaches to machine learning. Yeah, that was really motivating. And in recent years, I haven't developed so much anymore, but I'm working even more with the users, and it's really great when the users make some discoveries for the first time on their own, or do some type of analysis for the first time. That's also quite motivating in this line of work.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very rewarding staying that close to the users. That's great. Well, really, really a pleasure to have you both on the show here today. I think a good place for us to start is maybe Harald, if you can talk us through the journey of Visplore and how you got to where you guys are today.
Sure. So basically, the story of Visplore started in a research project with industry. First application was actually in automotive engineering, with stealing lots of simulation data. And basically, the goal has kind of stayed in a one way the same until today, namely to enable users, also without data science background, to analyze massive, complex data. The fields of application have then extended over the time to manufacturing, energy, and some other sectors. And basically what we tried to overcome also compared to some other solutions for data analysis, is we wanted to deal with challenges that are kind of more towards the engineering perspective. So for example, we want to see how can users analyze hundreds of variables? How can they explore really complex relations? How can they deal with unclean sensor data? And how can all this be kept fast and responsive also while you're analyzing millions of data records? Yeah. And so Visplore is basically the result of working on these challenges. And in 2020, we founded the Visplore company and a spin-off of the research center. And we are now proud to be a great company backed by a VC investor and developing Visplore ever further.
Great. Well, congratulations. I love talking to companies that are sort of in that earlier phase. Everything is so new and exciting, and everyone is just, I mean, I guess it's been almost 2 years now that you've been, that you've officially launched. Is that right?
Yes, it's almost 2 years that we launched as a company, but as I said, I think the development of Visplore, actually the roots date back more than 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that background. So the topic of today is understanding your data within minutes. And just a reminder for the audience out there, again, it's hashtag Visplore. I see several comments coming in of hashtag Visplore all over LinkedIn, all over YouTube. Thank you guys for joining. And a quick reminder that we are taking questions throughout the session, and we will have a special prize for the best question asked. So go ahead and start getting those questions in, centered around understanding new data as quickly as possible. And I think on that note, let's get into the topic, right? Why is it important for us to understand new data? So if I'm a data analyst, data scientist, I get this new data set. What now? Why do I really have to understand everything about it?
Yeah, maybe I can take that question. So why is it important to understand it? I mean, if you don't understand your data, you will run into severe problems. So you cannot really feed your data into an algorithm, for example, and just hope for the best. You may assume some things like everything is fine, the data is complete, you have no gaps, no outliers, and everything in the data is kind of homogeneous and can be treated in the same way. But all of that may not be true if you just feed your data into the algorithm and hope. So if you don't know for sure, you will definitely do some wrong assumptions in parameterizing the algorithms and your statistics that you do, your modeling. And you only find out about this very late, yeah, by bad model predictions or by bad decisions that you make, for example. That's too late, and it can be avoided by understanding your data in the first place. So wrong assumptions can even lead to project failure. If you don't get a working solution at all or have some very costly iterations. And even from a business perspective, your results that you get may not have actually any business value. There was one case, one anecdote that I can share from a customer. They had a predictive maintenance project, and the data scientists found out the machines are often interrupted around certain times, around 10 a.m. something. And then after interpreting this with the domain experts, they found out this is the morning coffee break where they just turn the machines off. So basically anything that seems significant in the data doesn't necessarily have to be relevant. Yeah? And so really understanding the data, you're on the safe side.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense. You started out by saying we can't simply feed the data into an algorithm and hope for the best. Why not? What could possibly go wrong with that?
Yeah, well, you will probably get some result.
Yeah.
But in the end, it will be you who is acting and deciding what to do with this. Yeah. And this can be anything bad happening from that in the end. You can get, for example, I mean, it can be just wrong by a bit if you get out some wrong numbers and you just accept them because they look good enough, but you don't know that your wrong assumptions actually have kept you from getting 2 times as good the results. Yeah, for example, you don't recognize it just from the numbers. You can communicate things based on that and just discover much later when maybe it looks good in the beginning, but afterwards you discover errors that will be more and more costly the later you discover it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
But even it starts with simple things like computing the mean. Yeah. If you compute the mean, but you have multiple modalities, the mean is useless.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it's a very
true.
very good example. Yeah. Very simple.
So we have plenty really good questions coming in. I'll go ahead and start with one here from Aitasham. He's asking, what's the role of domain knowledge in understanding data? Do we have to be an expert, or can we rely on the experts of the domain?
Well, I think maybe I take this. I think the domain knowledge is one of the most success critical parts of a data science project. Yeah. Because on multiple levels, it starts with understanding the business problem. Yeah, and I think this should always be the first thing to do, is really understand. You can interpret data in myriads of ways, yeah, and put out some results. But I think it's important to understand the business problem, and this is typical where domain expert, one part of the domain expertise. And it goes further along the pipeline, like understanding what is this pattern, like understanding which part of the time series can you use, yeah. And in order to be really successful for a data science project, I think really you need to make two ends meet. Yeah? And one is getting the domain knowledge into the project. And the other end is, of course, being able to handle this massive amounts of data. Yeah? And making these two meet is also what we try to achieve with Visplore by making massive analysis of massive data more accessible to domain experts on one hand, and the other is making the dialogue between data scientists and domain experts easier. Talking about the data and understanding each other better. But I think it should really be domain expertise is very important right from the start along the entire project.
Yes. I think there's definitely a huge demand and need for bridging that gap between the domain / business experts and the data scientists, more the technical folks. And I know we're gonna get into a short demo of how Visplore actually helps accomplish this. I do want to take a couple more questions here. And one of the questions was from Joseph, and he says, although visualizations can help, what are the areas that we need to watch out for when applying visuals to data? For example, if data is not scaled properly, it can give us the wrong signal, or I guess we can also think about outliers that might skew some of that visual data. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think it's a good question. Thank you for that. Actually, I would kind of reverse it a bit. Yeah, like what do we need to be aware of when we do some analytics on data? Yeah, because I think that's often the more critical part where people are not so aware of, that they, as Thomas said before, they can't stuff data into some algorithm, but the algorithm might make assumptions which don't fit. And I think it's actually a big strength of visualization to largely avoid these assumptions. So just a simple example, look at a scatter plot. Yeah, every one of you, I think, knows a scatter plot, very trivial technique. And the nice thing of it, it almost always works. Yeah. So whether your data can be unimodal or bimodal, it might have outliers, clusters, it can be correlated or not, the scatter plot will show. Yeah. And while most statistical approaches actually do make some assumptions. Yeah. Do we have just one cluster, are there severe outliers or not? Yeah. The scatter plot shows. And that brings me to a second important aspect of Visplore. It also allows you basically to discover the unexpected. It shows you unexpected patterns. Yeah, it doesn't just show you what you were looking for in the first place. Yeah, but it really allows you to detect patterns you wouldn't even know that there are. And as another small anecdote, so when we're working with customers, typically one of the first findings when we have some new data set is that we show them some problems about their data they didn't know they have. Yeah, so this is in 90% of the cases, this is the first finding about some anomalies in the data or data problems, or there might be parts where the data is missing, or yeah, a lot of that can go wrong, but visualization will show. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the best ways to uncover any data quality issues is to visualize your data. And sometimes you'll see like a really large number off to the side somewhere, and it could have been a typo or something where people added 3 extra zeros instead of 1. Very, very quick and easy to identify that. I think sticking to the conversation of working with new data, I know, Thomas, you told us some of the downfalls and kind of why we have to do this. And Harald, you started touching on some of the important things that we need to keep in mind, like some of the first things you do with clients when you're trying to show them how to visualize their data properly. What would you say are some of the other best practices of working with a new data set?
Well, I think first, very simply, look at your data. Yeah, just for the reasons that I just outlined.
Yeah.
And then I think as a kind of a type of workflow, I think what can be a good pattern is to start by looking at the variables separately from each other. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Then to look at combinations of variables, and then to look at the entire data. Yeah, like searching for variables, clusters or clusters in your data records, etc. So this would be one axis. And I think the other axis is first looking at the structure. Yeah, mm-hmm. So things like, do we have missing values? Do we have outliers, etc., etc. But then moving from the structure more to the meaning. Yeah, so okay, we do have outliers, but what do they mean? Yeah, is this just the wrong measurement, or might we have a more substantial problem with the data of the process underlying the data generation? Yeah, mm-hmm. If we have some strange pattern in a time series, yeah, is this something that we must take care of, or is this some data that we can just exclude for training a model, for example? Yeah, right. And so I think this is basically the two axes that I would see. So going from 1D over 2D to the entire data set as one axis, and the other going more from the structure to the meaning of things.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for that. And we have plenty of questions coming in around the actual tool Visplore, and I know we're gonna show a demo in just a couple of minutes. And I think before we get into the demo, do you guys want to quickly walk through maybe a process flow of how does this typically work with Visplore as a tool, or if not, I could just get right into the demo. Up to you.
Right. I think that's actually quite nicely explained by that demo video that we've prepared for this. Yeah, so it's
okay.
You can just play it.
Okay. And guys, right after the demo, we're going to do our first giveaway. So quick reminder before I hit the demo button is #Visplore to enter the raffle for the dedicated inner circle. And definitely keep the questions coming. We have so many great questions. Harald and Thomas are going to select the best question asked and provide a 6-month access to Visplore Professional for free. All right, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the demo.
After starting Visplore, you can import your data from many sources. We are loading a CSV file now, but you could also import data frames from Python and many more. So loading the CSV file starts with a preview of the dataset. This is a time series dataset here from a turbine in hydropower. We have sensor measurements every 4 minutes, water temperature, oil temperature, but also some categorical variables here, like the operation state of the turbine. This is a real dataset, and the goal was to predict this oil temperature from the other variables, to monitor it in real time. So let's load the data. The first thing we usually want to do is data screening to see if the data is plausible and to identify suitable training data for modeling the oil temperature. A special thing of Visplore is that you have predefined entry points into your analysis here on the left, these predefined cockpits. So let's start by looking at trends and distributions. And here we go. Without any setup, you have a list of statistics for each of the 21 sensors. a time series visualization, and a histogram. These views are already linked, so if you select another sensor, you see how the other plots show that sensor. Now, often you have some outliers in the data. You can zoom in here and see that this drop to 0 is not exactly plausible. So what can we do about this? Like in a drawing program, Visplore allows you to select these outliers and to clean them, for example, by linear interpolation. And you see, they're gone. Another important early step is checking the data completeness, so if you have missing values. For this, you can sort the sensors by the percentage of missing values, and see that actually many of the sensors have data only after April 2017. So maybe we can only use this part of the data for prediction. Let's look at our target variable, the oil temperature. This has no missing values, but here there was a renovation of the turbine. And so the data before is kind of obsolete. So yeah, we can only use the data after April, and let's just select this data and filter to it. All right, this already looks better, but we still see something. Besides the normal operation, where the oil temperature was more or less steady, there are spikes here in the oil temperature. Let's zoom in and have a closer look. Yeah, so there are these shutdowns here. And we actually have categorical information in this data about the current operating state. Let's look at this. So we see that mostly it was normal operation, but then there were these shutdowns and on-ramps. And if we hover this here, you see these times already highlighted in the timeline. Then there were these shutdown periods and some on-ramp periods. Now, this linking of categorical views with the raw sensor values is really a USP of Visplore. We only want to predict a normal operation, so let's focus on that and filter. And now it looks like useful data for prediction. Let's add the water temperature here, which is a possible input feature, and already discover some correlation. But for looking at correlations, we can switch to another cockpit. Here you see an overview of correlating variables. The red ones here have a strong positive correlation. Looking at oil temperature and water temperature, we also see a good correlation. It's not exactly linear, but we can switch the regression line to a quadratic polynomial, which fits better. And here we also discover two clusters. Why is that? Let's select one of them with a lasso. And we discover there has been some change here. But it seems for the most recent normal operation, after September, we now have selected a good, clean training data set. And we also found one possible input feature with the water temperature. We can export any visualization as an image at any point. And it's also possible to export the selected training data set to Excel for follow-up tasks. This concludes our workflow. We have checked if the data is plausible, cleaned it up a bit, discovered some correlating input variables, and finally exported our insights and selected data subsets for follow-up tasks.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you for that demo. I think that was really helpful for everybody to see how Visplore actually works from start to finish. We have plenty of questions that are coming in, and I'm going to start with a question here from Joseph. He's asking if if Visplore can import data via API. The data import screen does not seem to have that many options available. So I wanted to see what options are available for data imports.
Maybe I can take this one. Yeah, so there's actually several options built in with native importers, like very flexible CSV and a database importer where you can connect to any databases using ODBC. But regarding APIs, we have APIs for Python, R, and MATLAB. And especially the one for Python, I want to point out, because there is a Visplore Python API that is just a Python package, basically, that you can install. And then it's just one line of code to start Visplore and send over some data, for example. And that kind of also serves as a gateway to many more data sources that you have just Python APIs to, basically. It just basically, I think more or less every major data source has some kind of Python API, and using that, it's possible to get your data in from many more sources than you've seen in this list. There are additional ones that we have, for example, to the OSIS of Pi system, a very common process historian for process industries. But stressing this API, Python API, for example, is one that many users use to extend the connection capabilities to Visplore.
Maybe we should also add to this Python API that this is actually it works in two directions. Yeah, it's not only limited to getting data in of Visplore, but the way how our data scientists are typically using Visplore is using it side by side with their Jupyter notebook or whatever they are working in. So basically, you can have your usual Jupyter notebook as you used to, or some other Python tool, and work simultaneously with Visplore. Yeah, so you can use the API to transfer data back to Visplore or get it back from Visplore. So take a simple example. Assume you want to label your data. Yeah, you can get your data frame directly from pandas to Visplore, can do some data exploration, as you've just seen in the video, do some labeling of the data, for example. You can use this manually, or you can use things like pattern search and some automated features. And then you can use also our Python API to get back the labeled data. Yeah, or you can do some kind of pivot analysis and get back the results of this. So there's actually quite a lot of flexibility. You can also get back images, and using this, you can even write a fully automated way to use Visplore for generating graphics for a presentation, for example. So also this works. That's actually really flexible.
Wow, that sounds really powerful. I love the idea that you can go back and forth with the programming tools. Really awesome. I know I promised folks we're going to do that first giveaway after the demo. So before we do more questions, I'm going to go ahead and run our first raffle here. And guys, if you want to enter for the second round, which we're going to do towards the end of the session, just type in #Visplore. For now, I'm going to go ahead and click draw, and we're going to find our very first winner for the dedicated Inner Circle membership. We're gonna get you the membership as soon as the show's over. Congratulations to John H. Verona. I will follow up with you after the session. Thank you for participating. And let's go ahead and keep this party moving. Now, I love data visualization. I love data storytelling. I love analyzing data. And I've probably used almost, if not all, the tools out there like Tableau, Power BI, Qlik, Pyramid Analytics, and ThoughtSpot. So many tools out there. How would you say Visplore compares to one of these commonly known data visualization tools?
Sure. So I would say most of typical BI tools or business intelligence tools, their main workflow is they are designed for building dashboards. Yeah, they are designed for building dashboards in a step-by-step manner. So using this drag and drop interfaces, you can build your first visualization, then you add a second, a third, and finally you end up with a dashboard. Yeah, that's perfectly fine as long as you know what you want to build. Yeah, and you have a good idea of how you build it. Yeah, because building great dashboards is actually not so easy. But those tools are not designed really for rapid data exploration. Yeah. So when you have, as we've just seen, I think one of the key differences between Visplore and tools like Tableau or Power BI is that you really start with such cockpits where you don't need to create visualizations one by one, but where you can really just load your data and you start your correlation cockpit, for example, or your pattern search cockpit or your regression cockpit and many more of that. And you're there, yeah? You have the visualizations ready, you have the analytics ready, you have the interactions ready, all of that linked, all of that ready to be used within seconds. I think this is one big difference. And I think there are 2 or 3 others. One is Visplore has always been made to scale really for many variables. Yeah? So in typical business intelligence applications, you do not have that many variables. Yeah, you have some dimensions, some measures, and that's it. So here it's really meant to scale for many variables. It's also scaled for dealing with data which is not aggregated. Yeah, so basically this wasn't mentioned in the video before, but we were looking at 500,000 of data records, yeah, times 20 sensors, and this wasn't even the biggest data set. So basically people are using also Visplore with data sets in the scale of several million data records times 100 data attributes, and we'll also stay fast on that level. So I think this high interactivity when visualizing data that's not aggregated, yeah, I mean, of course, you can use Tableau perfectly for millions of data records if you aggregate everything into several bars of a bar chart. Yeah, but if you really want to look at the data in a non-aggregated way, as you need to do, for example, when you have sensor data, it will not perform that well. Yeah, and so I think this is where Visplore is really has an architecture that's really built to scale for this interactive data exploration.
That's great, and I think you've touched on a question from Kiran from earlier when he was asking to share effective techniques for understanding data with lots of features. So let's say over 200 features within minutes, and I think the answer to Kiran's question is get Visplore. That's.
I think one of the answers to this is we have. So let me give 2 answers to this. First is I think one of the things that we have in Visplore that are basically beyond the standard visualization techniques like bar chart and scatter plot and what you would expect is overview techniques, scaling for really hundreds of variables. So for example, we have heat maps visualizations where you can really have an overview of how a few hundred variables are distributed over time, for example. Or in the correlation cockpit, as you've just seen, we also have the possibility to correlate hundreds of variables with one target variable. Yeah, and even see, okay, if the correlation is different for example, certain periods in time and things like that. There are some of these overview techniques that really scale well for this range of variables. Another answer is built-in analytics. Like when you, for example, say then this is actually a common use case for process engineers, for example. If you say, okay, you select one period of time of your process, for example, when things are working well, and then you select another one when things are not working well, maybe you have some much scrap production or whatever, yeah, and you say you can compare these two, and you can do this with Click and Visplore, then Visplore will automatically do analytics to rank, so to order all the variables by their significance in explaining the difference, so to see which of the 300 sensors have actually changed between these two periods. Yeah. And one answer is, if you want to learn more, there is lots of documentation about Visplore that you can find on our webpage when you go to the resources part, and then you also find the entry point to our user documentation, and there is also a list of visualizations that basically explains some of also the more non-standard visualization techniques for scaling for many variables.
Yeah, I actually checked that out before the session. I think it's really useful and helpful to the audience to know. And guys, we are sending a link to everything Harald was just talking about after the session. If you want to make sure you're on the list to receive the link, if you look in the description of this session, maybe after we're done here, make sure you sign up officially for the session. This way you get on the email list, and we'll follow up with the visualization documentation and more about Visplore that Harald was just talking about. I see a really fun question here from Dan, and maybe Thomas can answer this first. What is your favorite feature of Visplore?
To pick one is really hard. I like, well, there is, for example, one that really feels interactive and also kind of is unique. If you've heard of this, it's called peak brush, and it means that, for example, if you discover you have some groups in the data, you have some categories in the data, or some pattern somewhere. Let's think of categories. It's easy, and you can just, for example, if you hover with your mouse over one of them, it will immediately highlight that data subset behind that object, that bar or something, in all of the other views without putting any expensive filters or doing selections or anything. You just hover there and you can see, okay, that's this, and can relate it across multiple views. Because this is something that's really interactive and fast. And there was one question before about pitfalls of visualizing something when you have some outliers and some things, and then you may stumble across this, and it's really important to look at raw values and to look at the data from different angles to really find out, for example, why you see a certain, let's say, outlier or pattern somewhere. And then you can, for example, just hover this and see in some other visualization maybe why this happens, or some other dimensions that explain that.
Okay.
That's one of the very rapid interactive things that you can get, but there's really many more.
So I think just adding a concrete example to this, let's assume you have data from, don't know, flights, millions of flights, yeah, and you have your airlines, kind of a bar chart, yeah, and then for each flight you have something like a, don't know, the time it was too late, yeah, for example. It's one of the variables, yeah. So you might see that some airlines are doing worse than other. But just based on the bar chart, you couldn't tell, is this just due to some outliers or is this really a trend? Yeah, right. And using just hovering them with a peak brush will immediately highlight all corresponding flights. Yeah, and you see, okay, in one case we might have an extreme outlier, yeah, that introduces quite some bias, while in other it might really be kind of a bigger trend. Of course, everything of this can also be checked with statistics. Yeah, so just to be really clear on this, but the question is, would you how fast can you do this, and can you really also detect, for example, clusters, or would you also check for all types of clusters there, or is it not easier just to hover over that and see that there are clusters which you might not even have expected?
Right.
So maybe in general, I would say my favorite feature is the interactivity, and that peak brush is just one example, because it can do anything with statistics or with Python, with coding, with everything, but you're just so much faster that you can answer more questions, and some questions you can answer only if they're fast to answer.
Okay, so your favorite is interactivity. Harald, same question.
I would take Thomas' answer a bit further. I would also say it's the apart from things like dealing with hundreds of variables and so, I would also say one thing that's really unique is how it feels different. That this is the interactivity, and one thing that I think it enables. Because this interactivity is not a goal in its own, right? But it is a means that enables things that you couldn't do otherwise. And one specific thing that enables is it fosters some kind of new type of communication about data. Yeah, and I think this is a very important thing. We talked before about the importance of getting domain knowledge into data science projects. Yeah? And actually, I've talked to so many data scientists to say that this is actually the hardest part. Yeah, and how Visplore can help here is that basically with this interactivity, it enables them to enter some kind of communication mode they couldn't do otherwise. Yeah, they are not just interpreting some static graphics that you have prepared before, but the domain expert can ask questions like, okay, and can we add this variable more, and can we compare those two time periods, and what would happen if we just remove those outliers, and yeah, so lots of possibilities here, and to really be able to answer these questions on the fly. Yeah, this not only saves a lot of iterations and a lot of time and makes projects significantly shorter, but it can also be a huge quality improvement in the results, because you get domain knowledge into the data science project at an early stage in an agile way. Yeah, that can really in the end decide between success or failure. Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree. And I think if I could just tell folks, my favorite feature so far upon seeing the demo and talking to you guys even before is I like that people don't have to start from a blank screen. They don't have to think too much. They put their data in, and then they, I guess, select a starter kit or a cockpit or whatever you guys refer to it as. And then it sort of just shows you things without you even asking your very first questions yet. It does a lot of that work for you. So that would be my favorite feature. I know we're getting close to time, so I'm going to try to get through as many more questions as we can. We've got one here from George Firican, and he's asking if you also work with live data, or if not, I guess that's something in the future.
Well, actually, it is possible to get in live data. Yeah. It depends a bit on the data source. Yeah. So if you just load a CSV file, it won't fit for live data. But for example, if you're using our Python API that we mentioned before, it is possible, for example, to add new data records on the fly. Yeah. And in this way, for example, make it applicable to live data. And as Thomas briefly mentioned, for example, we also have a direct connector to the OSIS of Pi system, and also there it's possible to get live updates from the process data there.
All right, thank you. Okay, I absolutely love this question from Dustin. So how would you sell Visplore to a non-technical business leader that might have purchasing approval? So the business leader, how would you actually sell this to them?
I think it's a bit. It will differ a bit. So I think you could argue the benefit of Visplore in two ways. One is that you can argue, as I just did before, it saves people really, really much time. Yeah, and all those myriads of people struggling in their day, saying they have no time for everything, because in the end they're struggling with some Excel sheets, yeah, to just get some graphics for reports prepared. I think this is one answer to this. Another answer is the quality of improving the communication. Yeah, that really can make such a big difference for the success of data science projects. And part of our users is, let's say, less from the data science part, but more from the process engineering part. And there, basically, I say that we have other arguments. For example, we have customers who managed to reduce their scrap rate by findings that they did in Visplore. Yeah, they managed to save energy for their assets. Yeah, by findings they did in Visplore. They managed to do. To optimize their ramp-up procedures, sticking with the example we've seen in the demo. And this is just some parts of it. So it's not only about the process itself that becomes better, but it's really also about, of course, the value of the results and the findings you do with Visplore that can pay off very, very soon.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, talking about users of the actual tool, who would you say actually uses Visplore now?
I'd say, making it very shortly, I'd say about half of the users are more from the data science part. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And especially when data scientists are working with kind of big sensor data, just as the example we've just seen. And I'd say the other half of the users are more from the process engineering part, like, for example, working in big chemical enterprises, pulp and paper, pharmaceutics, discrete manufacturing, and energy sector, very important energy sector, having no background in data science, but using Visplore to enable them to get much more out of the data. Yeah.
Okay, that's very helpful. And where can people go to learn more? I know Visplore.com is probably the best place to go, but if people wanted to continue the conversation with you guys, where would be the best place for them to find you?
Thomas, do you want to take this?
Sure. So various places. So one is you can just write us an email, but you can also find us on LinkedIn, of course. So please reach out. Yes, our webpage. There you find also the contact details, email address, and everything. There's lots of resources there. We have a video academy where you can look at some videos of Visplore in action for specific use cases, for getting to know how to operate the software very efficiently. And that's also leading us to a very important point. We have a free version called Visplore Free. And we encourage every one of you to just visit visplore.com and download that free version. It's very lightweight and fast to install, so it doesn't need admin rights. It's available, and you can use the step-by-step guides and our documentation that Harald already mentioned, or the videos to get acquainted with this very easily. There's a lot of integrated help and tutorials and everything. But if you just want to reach out, please write us in LinkedIn or an email. We're happy to connect.
Perfect. And as a follow-up, again, for everyone who is officially registered for the session, I will send all the links that Thomas was just talking about and that Harald mentioned earlier with the visualization documentation that they're working on. And like I said, I've seen some of that really cool stuff, and I love data visualization. So when I say it's cool stuff, I mean it's cool stuff. And by the way, Dustin agrees that the quick upstart was really impressive. Thanks, Dustin. Before we wrap up the show, I know we have one more giveaway. So guys, hashtag Visplore to play. And I'm going to share my screen one more time. And I know we had our prior winner, John. Congratulations again. So for our second winner of the dedicated inner circle, I'm going to go ahead and draw again so we can get our second winner. And Thomas and Harald, the questions that we didn't really get a chance to get to. Oh, congratulations, Michelle. We will follow up with you after the show to make sure that you get your free access. Thank you guys for participating. As I was saying, the questions that we didn't get to, we have so many great ones. If you or somebody from your team has the time and bandwidth to go in there and start responding to some of these questions, and I'm sure we'll get more as the day goes on and people are watching the recording. I think they really appreciate getting some of those answers. I'm sure we can still talk for another 5 hours if we were to take all the questions that are coming in, but I want to, be conscious of time here. So at this point, I want to just remind folks that you will select a winner for Best Question Asked. And I really want to thank you both for making it onto the dedicated show. I had a great time learning about Visplore and learning more just about best practices of working with new data sets and working with stakeholders in the business. So really, thank you so much for your time here today.
Thank you very much for the invitation to everyone watching. I hope it was useful. And keep Visploring your data.
Oh, I love it. Keep Visploring your data. Yes, follow Visplore on LinkedIn, their company page, so you can stay on top of all their updates. And again, thank you all for joining the session as well.
Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Have a great day. Bye.